In 1971, Clint Eastwood and director Don Siegel changed action cinema forever with the movie Dirty Harry. This was a crime drama about a take-no-prisoners cop who also gets the dirtiest jobs in his city. Clint Eastwood plays the title role in the movie, and this would be his first outing as San Francisco Police Department Inspector Dirty Harry Callahan. The film is loosely based on the case of the Zodiac Killer. This film was a massive box office hit, and it divided some of the critics with its apparent political messages. And the one thing it did was it made Clint Eastwood into the biggest movie star in the world. After Clint Eastwood and director Don Siegel came aboard to the project, they hired Dean Reisner to work on the script. In his first rewrite, the bank robbery scene that is such an iconic scene, where Harry points the gun at the bank robber and tells him, "You gotta ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky?" Well, do you, punk? The original script has Harry placing the gun against his own temple, and he pulls the trigger. He then laughs, and he walks away. Eastwood and Siegel both felt that this was too extreme, even for Harry Callahan. As I said earlier, the serial killer in the movie is named Scorpio, and that is really loosely based on the Zodiac Killer and the way he used to taunt the police and the media with his notes about the crime. And the detective of Harry Callahan is also based on the real-life lead investigator in the Zodiac case named David Toschi. Now, the actor that plays Scorpio, the serial killer, is Andrew Robinson, and he created a backstory for his character, which involved him being drafted into the Vietnam War and just seeing unspeakable things while he was overseas. When he returned home to the United States, he found himself a figure of hate, and with his war experiences, combined with the people's treatment of the soldiers at that time, it just caused him to go insane. In real life, Andrew Robinson is a complete pacifist who despises guns. He doesn't even like to look at them. In the early days of principal photography, he would flinch violently every time he fired the gun. Producer and director Don Siegel was forced to shut down production for a short time while they sent Robinson to school to learn how to fire a gun in a convincing manner. But if your eyes are really keen, you'll notice that he didn't get past this. He still blinks noticeably when he shoots. He was also real squeamish about filming the scene where he is verbally and physically abusive to the school children. He didn't like doing this at all. And one of the reasons he got the job and was cast was because of Clint Eastwood. Clint had seen him in a Broadway production called The Idiot. And then Eastwood went on to convince the director that Robinson had the right characteristics to make an effective Scorpio. Clint performed most of his stunts in this movie, if not all of his stunts, including the stunt where he jumps onto the roof of the hijacked school bus from a bridge. You can clearly see his face throughout the entire shot, so this was definitely not a double that did this jump. It's also pretty well known that Clint Eastwood directed the scene with the suicide jumper. However, it's often claimed that he directed the scene only because the producer and director Don Siegel was extremely ill. This is accurate. He was terribly sick, and he wasn't even on the set. But Eastwood had always been scheduled to direct that scene. Due to the difficult logistics of getting the actors, director, cameraman, and sound man all on the top of a small ledge. In the shooting schedule, 6 nights had been set aside for shooting that scene. Eastwood told the studio that he could do it in 2 nights. When all was said and done, he shot the entire thing in 1 night. Now, the movie's most famous line the one we quoted a little bit ago, is often misquoted. A lot of people mistakenly quote the line as, "Do you feel lucky, punk?" While the actual line in the movie was, "You've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?" In the bank robbery scene, Harry enters a burger joint across the street from the bank that's being robbed. Around the corner from that burger joint, the viewers can see a movie theater marquee, and the movie that's playing at that theater is Play Misty for Me. That's a 1971 movie that was directed by Clint Eastwood. And that was in reality his first directorial job. Unlike most municipal police organizations around the country, the San Francisco Police Department calls their detectives inspectors. And this is the reason the title character's official rank and name is Police Inspector Harry Callahan, and not Detective Harry Callahan. This was really confusing for audiences in countries that used the British Commonwealth police ranking system, where inspector was a rank equivalent to a U.S. lieutenant. Arnold Schwarzenegger cites the character of Harry Callahan as being one of the biggest influences on his career. Schwarzenegger said watching this movie inspired him to seek out action roles with wisecracking heroes who are a law unto themselves. When composer Lalo Schifrin was scoring this movie, he told producer and director Don Siegel that he wanted to use female vocals for the scenes with the Scorpio killer in them. When Siegel asked him why he wanted to do this, he told them that he believed that Scorpio was conflicted about what he was doing, as you always saw him wearing a belt that had a buckle on it that had the peace symbol. Yet he was murdering people. Schifrin believed that Scorpio heard voices in his head, and the female vocals would represent that. The Scorpio killer's real name is never revealed throughout the entire movie, and in the ending credits, he's simply listed as Killer. However, after the movie was released, a novelization of it gave his real name as Charles Davis. Now, originally, this had a different working title than it ended up with, although it's hard to imagine the film being anything different than the title character's name. While developing the screenplay by husband and wife team Harry Fink and R.M. Fink, it was known then as Dead Right. The original script called for Callahan to be a tough New York City cop, but by the time Eastwood came aboard and re-teamed with director Don Siegel, it was decided that a better setting would be in San Francisco, a city that both of them loved. Now, the famous final scene almost didn't happen. After taking care of Scorpio in the film's final moments, Harry takes out his badge and he tosses it into the nearby water. Eastwood was initially very uncomfortable doing this. He feared that it would signify to the audience that Harry was definitely quitting police work for good. Siegel argued that instead it meant that Callahan was simply frustrated with the policing system that made it so hard for him to get rid of a killer in the first place. So they ended up deciding to compromise. The director told Eastwood that he could simply draw back his arm as if he were about to throw the badge before thinking twice and putting it back in his pocket. Eventually, though, Eastwood came around to Siegel's point of view and he threw the badge anyway. The idea that anyone other than Clint Eastwood could play this role of Harry Callahan just seems absolutely absurd. But there were a number of stars that were way ahead of Clint Eastwood in the running for this. The title role was offered to Steve McQueen, Robert Mitchum, and Frank Sinatra. And Frank Sinatra was the main one that the studios wanted for this. Frank Sinatra turned the picture down because he had injured his right hand in filming another movie, and he was afraid that he couldn't handle the heavy gun with ease. So he ended up passing on it. Then they went on and tried to get Steve McQueen and Robert Mitchum, and that didn't work out. And eventually they talked to Eastwood, and he stepped in, and the rest is history. But he was way down the list of the candidates for this film. That's amazing to think of because it only seems like he would fit in that role. Clint only agreed to star in this movie if they allowed Don Siegel to direct it. Siegel was under contract with Universal Pictures at the time, and Eastwood personally went to the studio heads and asked them to loan Siegel to Warner Brothers. Initially, when they shot this film, they couldn't find anybody that wanted to take it, and they ended up selling the rights to the film to ABC Television. And ABC Television wanted to turn it into a television movie, but after looking at it, the amount of violence in the script deemed that it would just be too excessive for television. So they went on to sell the rights to Warner Brothers. Now this is a great movie, and it started an explosion of these type of movies during the 70s. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.